everybody.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back. My name is Nakia Franklin.
And I'm Von Greta.
And welcome to this episode of The Real
and Raw Talk Show,
where there are no boundaries
and no judgments.
Welcome, everyone. We just want to say, first of all, I want to acknowledge the fact that we're both wearing white, and that's for a particular reason. Vaughn, would you like to share the reason for the choice?
And I want to really thank you. We didn't really talk about this, but that just kind of shows that sibling bond. You know, I expressed to her, my little baby cousin, she passed away, unfortunately. And her memorial service is tonight. And so they live way in Washington, D.C. And they're all wearing white to the memorial service. And so I promised my baby cousin, her baby sister, Jakira, who watches this show all the time, that I would round up my family and we would all wear white today in solidarity to give our angel to heaven.
Yeah.
So thank you, sis.
Absolutely. So I didn't want to step over that because I wanted to make sure that you were able to acknowledge that moment in this moment, and pay tribute to her. And can you say her name again? So for all those that are watching, who may desire to send a special prayer for the family.
Her name is Kamisha. She is the eldest daughter of my first cousin, Kirk Pickney and Linda. And her sisters are Lakila and Kira. And she does leave behind children and a husband. So if you guys can, you know, she was not sick. She went into the hospital for a procedure and didn't come back out. So it was very sudden and very hurtful, to say the least. So please be lifting up that family, our family, especially her parents and her siblings and her personal family.
Absolutely. I just didn't want to step over there because we always are willing to pray for others. And I think it's important for people who desire to go to God on our behalf to lift us up in prayer in a time of need as well. So let's introduce our guests. So this evening, the name of this episode is what, sis?
Hear Our Silent Cries.
Yes.
Very powerful.
Exactly. Our guest is Miss Shawanna Vaughn, the director of Silent Cry and author of her soon-to-be-released book, Cries for Change, From Incarceration to Advocacy. As our guest today, she is our guest today, and she is going to share with you her truth to her introduction into the criminal justice system, her journey throughout the system, her coming out of the system, and her reality of today. She will also leave us with a call to action that will further the call for reforming the criminal justice system as we know it even today.
Absolutely. Now, thank you, Nakia. So I'm very excited about the artist that we have for you guys today, mostly because it's just so amazing how things come together. When you hear Shawanna's story, and then you hear this poem by author and poetess Mallory, an awesome woman of God, and she will be making her debut. This is the first time she has courageously put her words into the atmosphere. I'm so excited for her. She's just a lovely lady. You'll learn more about her during the show as she introduces her piece a little later on.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the intentions for the show. Now, please join us for our pre-show introductions to be, it allows you to be informed of what the episode's intentions are every week. And this is just a little, information that we want to remind you of. We intentionally do this and believe it is important for you to join us during at 8:55 to ensure you can fully engage with our guests on each episode. Now, we have an expectation for our guests to be free and authentic in a safe space to have their say, for each guest to have their perspective heard, their voice listened to, and their truth known. Now, we have to always remember people on the outside can always look and assume different things, right? However, it's that person's journey, that individual's experience, and it's important for them to be able to share their truth and be relieved of whatever it is that they had not been able to get out before, so they can begin to heal and on their journey. So our guests are always unscripted, unfiltered, real, and raw. So
There,
please stay tuned, sis.
there you go, sis. Now, everybody, it's time to get real and raw. Now, we want to hear from you. For our audience members, our guests want to know what you're thinking. That helps the conversation flow and, of course, enhances the engagement. So, if you would please take a few seconds to go to www.streamyard.com/Facebook. Again, that's www.com/Facebook. That will allow you to grant StreamYard access to see your comments. Stick around, you guys, and post questions. Post your comments. And for goodness sakes, share, and do some more sharing. And start your own watch party because we want everybody to know about the real and raw. So now it's time to enter into what says the no judgment
zone.
Hey, you unmuted,
Oh my
girl.
God, praise the Lord. Okay,
That's
I'm back.
okay. I unmuted you. Well.
Hey y'all. This is like a totally
Good
different
evening.
atmosphere. We are like so relaxed and we are so excited at the same
It's
time
because
about
it's
what
raining
is
outside. That's why.
coming. What's this?
It's raining. It's raining outside.
Oh yeah, girl, it's pouring down
So I'm
out here, right?
like, chill.
Woo! So I just want to share a bit with you all. Because this episode, like the episode with Terrence Coffey, who was previously incarcerated, who's now a professor at the University of New York, right, and an advocate for the criminal justice system, reforming the criminal justice system. These conversations are near and dear to me. I have a background in criminal justice, and I've worked as a corrections officer, a sheriff's officer, parole officer, a hearing officer under the state of Texas. And throughout the years, you grow to understand the system, its effect on those involved with and impacted by the incarceration of any person, whether good or bad, right or wrong, innocent or guilty, right? The stigmas that are placed on those incarcerated, the guilty before innocent experience, and the incarceration of those with mental illnesses due to the lack of appropriate placement and funding leads to overcrowding in jails and prisons, wrongful convictions, and people being lost in the system. Yes, I said the word lost in the system. So many of you may not be able to see this as a real experience or an injustice due to your status or stature, or simply your ignorance. Yeah, I said that because a lot of us are ignorant
It's
in a lot
really
of
wrong.
things. Right,
You
right,
can say whatever you want to say.
right. So, whatever the case, there are real people in this world who have experienced trauma, a brokenness, and a loss of hope due to the exposure of their time with law enforcement. Minor traffic offenses, as a lot of you know, when African Americans are pulled over and have that first contact with law enforcement, it begins a domino effect of having new and repeated experiences with law enforcement, especially depending on who you were pulled over by, why you were pulled over, and where
Mhm.
you were at when you were pulled over. So those minor offenses that you choose to, like, if you got a traffic ticket, you may have failed to pay the traffic ticket, forgotten to pay it, or just simply made a decision that it wasn't that important for you to pay it. That contact with the criminal justice system is what begins your unfortunate journey into being on the wrong side of the law. Now, we have had law enforcement on this show. We have had individuals like Mr. Terrence Coffey, like I just said, on the show, who was previously incarcerated. And now he's a major advocate for the changes that we're seeing in the criminal justice reform system and measures within the United States government, as well as in New York. Now, he is also, as you recall, a well known professor, like I said, from New York University. And today, we have a beautiful, amazing queen who has experienced incarceration herself in a way that you would never have imagined could happen to anyone. And it will have your heart sink. You may even shed some tears, and your love will overflow for the years that have been stolen from her. And when I say stolen, you will understand why when you hear her backstory. And as a result of her cries for change, from incarceration to advocacy, is more than a silent cry. It is a vision that she could have never imagined, and a calling on her life that was her destiny, even before God created the heavens and wrote her name down. So I would like to introduce you to the amazing, the beautiful, the director of Silent Cry Incorporated, Miss Shawanna Vaughn.
Thank you so much, ladies. Oh my God. You guys are so amazing. Your intro made my night. You made me happy. Um, Thank you for the space. Thank you for real and raw. My name is Shawanna Vaughn. I'm the director of Silent Cry. And the journey for incarceration to advocacy for me started April 15th, 1978. And though we talk about slavery in a form of Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth, well, I talk about slavery in the form of I was born on a plantation called Corona State Prison for Women, April 15th, 1978. I talk about I am the dream and the hope of the slave because, like slaves, my mother, gave birth shackled and chained. And
Mhm.
so we're not talking about uh, coming over on the boat shackled and chained. We're not talking about Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. So when I talk about slavery, I'm saying we are currently enslaved at the tune of 2.3 million Americans in this country. Not to mention the children that are born to mothers in prison. And by any other name of slavery and plantation, it wouldn't even be correct. So if we have to talk about being born in slavery, then I have to address my trauma. And trauma happened in my mother's womb before I ever got here because my mother was addicted to substance abuse. Consequently, my mother had 4 children and she didn't get to raise anybody. Um, and sometimes we are legacy trauma. And I did not understand what that meant because I was not raised with a person, but I had all her character traits. And I didn't even realize it because I had no clue of the person. And it took growing up, I was sent to foster care, and thank God, my foster father knew my real family, and that was stability, and that was a connection. And he made sure that I met my grandmother and I knew who my family was. Everybody doesn't get that. But sadly, August the 20th, 1986, my father passed away. And my father for me was the life and glue and bridge of life. Um, and we talk about ACEs. And then I began adverse childhood experiences. And I understood that we don't get the same help for trauma or grief because unfortunately, as African Americans, we live in a military style life where it's don't ask, don't tell policy,
Mm-hmm.
long before the military. And so all the things that happen to us in black households around the country, we don't tell them. We talk about the child molester at the family reunion and the funerals and the picnic. That's insane. We talk about all the bad things that happen and who they happen to, and the people and the perpetrators are still present. We're just lingering trauma. We don't leave legacy wealth, we leave legacy trauma. Well, my traumas led me to prison. And in prison at 17, I realized this was going to be something different. I got off the bus, shackled and chained. I got to receiving, and in receiving, people don't understand. If you've ever been through sexual violence or abuse, going to prison and going through receiving is sexually violent and abusive. Um, they tell you to cough and squat, and they check your body cavities to see if you have contraband. And
Mm-hmm.
for anybody who's ever been um, molested or in any type of violent situation, how do you think that reoccurring trauma feels in that moment? So you get through that, and then you realize that's going to be an occurrence quite often.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got on the other side of the gate, there was a lady named Bernice QB, and she was waiting on me. And she told me if I was my mother's daughter, then she knew I was coming to see her. Had I known then what profoundly that effect would have on me now, just those words. And I began to talk to this lady and figure out like who are you and why are you here? And she explained to me I was in prison with your mother April 15th, 1978, and I named you Shawanna. And I began to cry because she explained to me that if you were your mother's child, you had to come see me. And I did not quite understand what that meant. But I heard people say nature versus nurture. And I said, whoa. For as much disdain as I had for a woman I did not know, somebody pointed out that I was like the thing that I was trying to rebel from, and I did not know. If I only went to prison to get healed from that part of my life, Bernice QB was the bridge to make me understand that addiction is really an illness, and that her trauma created another cycle. And then I began to heal from the hurt of why didn't my mother want me? Why were we not enough? But then I understood she had a sickness that didn't have anything to do with me. But the more somebody poured into me, the more I realized that I had legacy, generational trauma in mass proportion. And prison, I did not understand in that moment at 17, was going to be the thing that fueled the trauma even further. There's more drugs in prison than there is in the freezer. I got there, they told me to get my bedroll and go to the medication room. They said here's Elavir to go to bed and Ritalin to wake up. Who needs that? Prison is a big pharmaceutical billion-dollar business all by itself that is creating and continuing the war on drugs, and nobody ever talks. Prison is the place I went to get woken up every morning at 5 a.m. being called a cunt by an officer who looks like me, a black man. And it's unconscionable to think that men kiss their wives and kiss their children, and they come to work and they check in to a place where they do harm and violence to women. Nobody talks about that either. And that's exactly what happened to women. And it is a silence that is not spoken, and it is unconscionable that in this country you don't have laws to prevent rape in prison because nobody believes the person that's incarcerated. One, I'm three-fourths of a human, and I'm the forgotten, and I'm the forgotten.
So, Shawanna, before we go further, I want you to share with the people what you currently do, who you are today. Then we're going to go deeper when we transition over to the second portion where Vaughn is going to ask you some more detailed questions on things that you've shared, as well as other things that you shared previously with us, right? So, what do you currently do today?
So
And thank you so
currently,
much for sharing in advance.
absolutely. So currently, I am the director of Silent Cry,
It's hard
and
for me to hear you. Can you
I,
come?
I am currently the director of Silent Cry
Okay.
and a mother of two beautiful children. And I currently have the only mass incarceration mental health bill in the country called post traumatic prison disorder, Shawanna W76337. If you're wondering what W76337 is, it is my prison number vendor from the Department of Corrections in the state of California. And so I'm currently advocating for individuals all over this country. I'm teaching policy and legislation to people who are incarcerated because I believe that the only way for us to take back our power is to write ourselves out of everything that our forefathers wrote us into.
Okay. Can you share a little bit? When did Silent Cry Inc. begin?
In 20, I was actually incorporated in 2013. I actually started working on Silent Cry in 2010 out of the necessity of dealing with my own issues. Silent Cry was birthed out of my own pain and lack of resources for women and lack of help because we're not thought about in the prison conversation. When people think about, reimagining justice, nobody's ever saying reimagine justice for the women in prison.
Mm, yeah.
And I really know that's a problem. And I know that mental health after prison and during prison is a problem. And nobody was there yet. And so I decided, how do we heal? How do I do my part? So for me, Silent Cry is my part.
Okay. And have you sought out any treatment? Are you getting counseling? Do you have mentors? What is your source of support as you go through your forever journey of healing?
I definitely have mentors, and I definitely have a therapist. I believe that healing hurts. I believe that we cannot get healed medicated. I believe we cannot get healed being disillusioned. Healing hurts. It just
Mm,
feels it. And we don't understand that healing is expensive. I have a pro bono therapist, but that's not the case for everybody. And for people who don't know, coming out of incarceration and on Medicaid or Medicare or whatever it is, the only way you can get a therapist is if you are getting medication. And so I had to go find a pro bono therapist or pay when I could, if I could, and how I could
mhm.
get therapy. And I don't believe that therapy is a luxury. I believe it's a human right to be whole.
Thank you so much. So I want to pause at this moment and I want to bring Vaughn into the conversation shortly. But right now, I definitely want to acknowledge you for your sharing. I want to acknowledge you for your transparency because, you know, for anyone who's listening to what you're sharing about being in prison, and being on the plantation and the experiences of rape and the experiences of being, medicated, the pharmaceutical companies utilizing the prison system in order to pump medicine out there as trial and error because nobody really cares about who's incarcerated anymore, right? And for the most part, they never did. Between utilizing the physical labor of inmates who don't get paid, from the inmates having to wash the officers' clothes and feed them the food and feed everybody else. I mean, I was an officer, so I know what it's like to be on that side of the fence. And there are officers who belittle and blatantly disrespect those that are incarcerated, and mistreat them. There are plenty of good corrections officers, sheriff's officers, law enforcement members. There are amazing human beings out there, right? And there's always a handful of individuals who go out every morning. They wake up on the wrong side of the bed, angry as all get out, and they intentionally go in to re-victimize and victimize and victimize and victimize, the women and the men who are institutionalized and those that are mentally unstable and unable to provide or do what is necessary in order to protect themselves. And being incarcerated, you indicated yourself, you had no voice. You have no way of getting away or no recourse of finding someone to support you or help you through an experience or situation or protect you from an occurrence. You were at the mercy of those officers that were supervising you. You were at the mercy of the prison system. You was at the mercy of the uh, the child care system, child advocacy system, as to whether or not they will be able to come in and rescue you or help you. So thank you so much for your transparency. Thank you so much for sharing. And you and Vaughn, like I say, we'll discuss more in the next segment. So right now, I definitely want to bring the poet into this portion of the show and give Miss Mallory an opportunity to share. And we'll be right back with you, Shawanna. So don't go anywhere.
So, I would like to talk about Mallory, who prefers to go by her first name. So that's why I only just say the first name Mallory. I met her a couple of months ago, um, and it was happenstance, and she was just a beautiful spirit, and I could feel it from the moment we stepped outside of the building we were at. As most know, when you meet me, I don't meet strangers. So we talked for probably 25 minutes outside before we decided to exchange our phone numbers. And it's just been an incredible blessing ever since. She shared with me that she has been through a few things, and she is vulnerably sharing all of her experiences, like you, Shawanna, um, in her craft. And her craft happens to be poetry and writing. So she's never, like I said earlier on the show, she's never stood before anybody and shared her poetry, let alone recorded it for the whole world to see over and over and over. And
Put on the pressure. Why don't you put on the pressure?
told her I was so proud of her, sis, that I'm taking time to really introduce her, because it's courageous to stand in front of people, period.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then my sister over there snapping. And then when you stand in front of them and spit your real truth, oh, well, that's a whole nother level of courage. Do you understand? So I'm gassing her up because the last couple of days, weeks, she has really, it kind of turned from me encouraging her to her covering me with a lot of encouragement. And so I just lightly. So I wanted to share with you guys how special she is. And I did a little bit of coaching with her, acting coaching and just encouragement, and she received it all and she ran with it, and that anointing showed up. Okay, so now I'm going to close my mouth and I'm going to ask you guys to snap your fingers and receive Mallory as she introduces her poem.
Hey, Real and Raw family, my name is Mallory. I am a poet. I am a soon-to-be author, blogger. You are about to watch my poem called Darkness Found Grace. It's a reflection of where I used to be to where I am now. It's a reminder of it doesn't matter how far you fall, God can always save you and offer redemption and offer you new life. I pray it blesses you and it touches you, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you would like to hear more, there will be links below. Thank you for watching.
Can I be honest and raw? Would that be okay? How do you heal if you don't shine a light on your dark? Who is that fallen angel in the mirror? Was it me? She's an image of my past, lost in the dark, fighting for the world's attention and craving their desire. Her eyes break my heart because with each flash, the light in her disappeared. She used her body to escape, longing to be every man's dream, revealing less and less clothes and addicted to sin. She laughed at danger, ran to destruction, and rebellion was her nature. She was playing with fire in the devil's playground, running from God and laughing at all his warnings. Her eyes screamed that she was dead inside, completely dark, maybe without a soul. She felt trapped in lies, lost in addiction, and her deepest secret was abortion. She wanted her next high, not a baby on a hip. Would she ever heal from that damage that she created? Was there forgiveness? I am reminded of who she was. I feel her pain because, well, she was me. She lived in madness and insanity because she didn't think she deserved peace or to be free. She created hell because she couldn't face demons within. She didn't have the courage to ask for help. She didn't know how to accept love, but rejection. So she pushed you away. She knew how to be used and replaced, not new. She was addicted to toxic love, not love that was real. She lived in fear and was terrified of being honest. That meant coming clean. To reveal her brokenness and her scars she never thought she could heal from. So she ran from God and her pain. I know her, and I am sorry. I'm sorry to the fallen angel I used to be. I forgive you, but I needed you to become me. I needed to fall that low to be reminded of forgiveness, because I now see an image of healing and grace, shining out any darkness from within. Because He loves every detail of my story. From darkness to light, He never left my side. I felt His hand pick me up, and I heard His voice say, "My child, please heal and forgive yourself today. You're not her anymore. You're you. This was your past. You're no longer there." So can I be honest and raw? I live in humility to stay away from the dark. I don't know her anymore, but I love her because, well, I learned about life and who to be. So don't be scared to shine a light on your darkness. Don't let it haunt you, because healing is just around that corner. If you are honest and raw, forgiveness can happen for anyone. I now use my voice to admit that I was broken, but He picked me up to fly.
I am like, my heart just failed. I'm like, oh my God, that was
You heard me, right?
so touching. And I'm like,
I love
it brings
it's so. When she turned that book around, that touched me more than anything. It really did.
and then artwork was beautiful. Shawanna, we can't hear you if you wanted to say anything.
Oh, let me make sure she can. Okay, can you? Can we hear you?
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you still.
Oh my God. She got me speechless and I want to cry.
We having a hard time hearing you.
She's saying that the poem had her speechless and she wanted to cry.
Yes. Listen, if anybody with any type of humanity heard her, then you have to feel something.
Right.
Because she said a lot. And
she did.
And what I got from her was that God's grace is sufficient.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely, Shawanna. I'm telling you. Check your phone, sweetie. Absolutely. It is that is exactly what it's about. And that artwork, she did that, of course. And I thought it was incredibly creative the way I didn't want to spoil it before you guys saw it, but I thought it was so creative the way she did not use her mouth, but she was writing in her journal, because we know that journaling is really, really powerful in the road of healing. Journey, right? The word is synonymous with one another, because healing is not a destination. It is indeed a journey, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Journaling and putting your thoughts together like that is what makes it. So Mallory, thank you so much for gracing our virtual stage, as I like to say, and showing that. And I hope you're back soon.
Absolutely. So thank you again, Mallory. Sis, I want to throw it over to you so we can move forward and get some additional information from Shawanna before our hour is up.
It's moving along. Shawanna, I told you that I was going to zoom by, girl. Let's get in. Okay. So let's go get in this thing. Now, I like the way you allow us to be real and raw. So I'm going to go ahead and go in with you. Okay. And if I feel like I need to give you a virtual hug, I'm going to be watching you. But I'm about to, okay, I'm just giving you, I'm buffering it. When we prepare our guests, as some of you guys know, we always spend some intimate time with them. In spending time with you, Shawanna, we heard a story from you that had us all crying. It touched us. You shared with us an experience to witnessing a very traumatic experience of one of your cellmates, right? Because she's having a little bit of technical problems, I'll just tell you guys, she witnessed the burning of one of her cellmates. She was burned to death. And so if you can, you may have to pick. She was set on fire. So I was like, Sis said she want to catch it more real and more raw. So Shawanna, if you would, my dear, can you please share with us that experience? I'd like to know what happened, but I also want to delve into how that affected you. Okay? So let's start with what happened. We can't hear you. You know what I want you to do, Shawanna? Can you do something for me, sis? Can you log out and log right back in really quickly and see if that'll help us out? We'll be right here waiting for you.
Right.
You know the devil is a lie. I couldn't even get in earlier today. I had to reboot my whole AT&T. You know they're not gonna reboot my bill, and they're not gonna reboot my bill and extract
Right.
some dollars off of it for this inconvenience.
You see, pull them straight up.
Yes.
Okay. So, um, wow. So we're clear that there are more accessible drugs in prison than there is out here. And I don't say that lightly. Um, but I had a roommate who owed a drug debt, and I was used to her getting beat up or whatever because she just did drugs and owed a debt. And I guess her family would always pay because she was always happy and always back to using drugs until she wasn't. And they issue war blankets, and did not expect somebody to come in and switch places to do that. Um, but if you can imagine, war is itchy anyway, and something that we should just stop making. But can you imagine a wool blanket catching on fire?
Quick.
Exactly. Um, and by the time you pop the door, everybody's gone. Um, and then the person is gone as well. Um, and because prison is a world of a world in a world, nobody wants you to tell the horrific things that actually happen in prison. That's just not it. Because people are bamboozled to think that the more people that are in prison, the safer humanity is. And that's not true. And so, how do you send people to prison for being a drug addict? How do you not give them help? And that's one of
So
the.
Shawana, this woman, and I'm sorry to cut you off. This one, because I want to make sure I follow the story. So this precious woman was your cellmate,
Yes. And
and somebody who had beef with her did this to her.
no, she just owed money. She owed like $200, and so you're
Hmm.
and for heroin, and
Oh,
then I mean like not even that much.
I
But
see.
how dare, first of all, you're already in a place where it's survival of the fittest. It's just a little insane. Um, Diane Downs is even in the same prison um, as I. And so you're just with people that you probably have no business um, as young people, but nobody deserves to go to prison and not make it out of prison. And we're clear that some people never make it home.
So what? So the door was left open, and
No,
she had on a wool blanket.
yes, like
Well, no, the door was not left open. The gate was not left open. It
the
was
time
locked.
you count time, they lock the doors. But there
And
was
then so this person threw in the fire
yeah,
on her, and so y'all couldn't get in to save her.
no,
Now, after this happened, were you able to mourn her loss? Were you able to talk about it with anybody?
no, because you're in a place of that's not acceptable. Um,
You said it's not acceptable.
that's not acceptable because everybody has to be strong. You're in survival of the fittest, and so you have to pack that trauma and unpack that suitcase when you're free.
Hmm.
Um, and so if you, that's a hard one to pack. Um, that's a hard one to pack because
I
that is something you never, everything you see in prison, everything that happens, you never unsee and you never unhear and you never un anything. Um, you learn to cope with, you learn to deal with, um, you learn to make peace with. But it's so hard to make people understand. And I'm glad that your co-host has worked in a prison,
mm-hmm.
but somebody understands. But when you go out and you try to explain to people who don't know the carceral system, it's a misunderstanding because
I learned something. I'm sorry to cut you off because you said so when you deal with people, I'm just repeating some of the things you say just to make sure that it's coming across clear. When you haven't dealt inside of the prison, then you may not understand. One of the things I was floored by and learned with your journey, you mentioned how you was lost in the prison system for a while because your caseworker was just this is when she wasn't supposed to be in jail. She was housed there because of housing troubles and you needed a roof over your head, so to speak. So you were there and your caseworker just signed off on the fact that you were being visited by her, but they never saw you,
no.
correct?
So okay, let me explain that one. When I went to prison, I was still quote unquote a foster child, right? The foster care worker came to visit me. I was going on my second year in prison to finish up my paperwork. And I was like, I'm confused. And so was she. She said, but we couldn't find you. How did you not know where I was? Because my paperwork says youth of California, state of California, rendered to the Department of Corrections of California. And so she's showing me stacks and stacks of paperwork that looks like somebody visited me my entire life throughout. And I'm like, no, I don't even know when's the last time I saw a social worker. And she's just looking at me and she looks devastated. And she goes, but I have paperwork. I said, I don't care what you have. So she starts telling me the names of the people. I'm like, I don't know any of those people. And
Mm,
because she's young and new to her job, she found it unconscionable that I had not seen a social worker and that she had to come into prison and do everything that everybody else had to do as a visitor. And she said, I feel violated. Oh, welcome to my world every day. Um, just for me to sign the paper to relinquish me from the foster care system. And I'm like, wow, I can't be a one of one. So how many young people get lost from the foster care pipeline to prison system? And how many of them never get a social worker to discharge them,
Mm-hmm.
but just
that
write
is a
off, just
scary,
them
scary.
off? Guess what? Because guess what? She had a choice. When she
Mm-hmm,
realized I was in prison, she didn't have to come. She could have faked the report like everybody else before her, like every predecessor before her. She could have just signed her name and said, I saw her and what about her business?
that's right.
And, so kudos to the people who show up in this foster care system as a social worker and actually take their job seriously enough to care where children are. We talk about where are the children. We're talking about sex trafficking. We can't even figure out where are the foster care children and they're stuck in the prison system. That's crazy. Any
Now, is
other?
this something that you talk about in your book? We know that you have an upcoming book coming out soon, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it
Tell
is.
us about your book.
It is something I talk about in my book because I'm actually currently working on foster care legislation
Okay.
um, with one of my really good friends, Pamela Stewart Martinez, who also was a part of the foster care system. And our stories differ, but they're
Hmm.
still the same. She talked about being bounced around from home to home to home, and I was in one home. We talk about the traumas of foster care and what that looks like. That's definitely in my book, but it's definitely coming out in legislation as well because I'm starting to be clear. If we don't write it down, it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's right on.
All right.
And this is why, you talked about journaling and the different writing. What you said was so because I'm clear that trauma.
Thank
So
you so much for sharing that. I'm sorry, sis. I, you guys, I want you to know that when we finish with this, and this week we're going to be posting all the information for Shawanna, and how I keep wanting to call you Shavanna because my name is Vaughn. Shawanna, on the web, on our page, so that you can follow her, contact her, support getting this book, because all of this advocacy, we couldn't even sit her down and reschedule her. She's on here recovering from bronchitis because she said, I won't stop. So I said, well, if she's not going to stop, we're not going to let her. So all of this work she does, and you have to understand that when you give your life to working in what you've gone through, you are refacing everything. So that takes a whole nother level of courage and grace. And so I'm just so proud of you. And I'm turning you back over to sis. Okay.
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 Thank you, sis. So Shawanna, I want to go back briefly on the experience that of your cellmate being set on fire. So you had mentioned to us that you as well as the other ladies who witnessed the situation was trying to get help and trying to make phone calls, but you were denied that access.
Mhm.
Can you share with us a bit about what occurred? What did they do to you to prevent you from gaining access to the outside world?
Well, we had to go to solitary confinement for a little while. And for me, I ended up after that in paper clothes in the psych ward until one of my roommates was like, cut it out. Nothing happened. You're fine. And the moment I said everything she said, I was released. And I was back in my room. And I was like, wow, this is really, because they just want to make sure you're not going to go tell anybody. And I'm like, this is really a world in a world. Um, and there's
So
no safe space.
so they prevented you just like anybody else. They protected themselves. They were protecting the system. If it would have gotten out and if you would have had access to the outside world, your intentions was to tell somebody to get these things investigated, but instead you were thrown into solitary confinement.
They can't.
It goes back to your silent cry, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and you talked about you having to deal with it, you having to kind of like suck it up and move on with your life and pretend that these things did not occur for you and for other people who have been victims within the system, just like yourself. That in itself is disheartening. It's hard for people to really understand that. It's hard for people to stomach that. It's hard for people to believe that. And that's why this platform is available for you to share. And what do you want people to be left with in this particular space? What do you want people to understand? Because I know a lot of this is in your book, which is why we advocate for people to, purchase your book and read your truth, right? What do
Mm-hmm.
you want people to be left with from your personal view and experiences of the criminal justice system? And I know that you don't think it's all bad,
No,
you
because
know, but what do you want people to be left with?
I want people to be left with um, the audacity to hope that we can reform a system. I want people to believe that we can transform everything that our forefathers set us into. We can recover from incarceration. We don't have to be our last mistake. We don't have to be legacy trauma. Um, we are more than our adverse childhood experiences. We are more than our adult traumas. Um, and my hashtag is birth and pain. It's like birthing a baby with nowhere anesthetic. You just got to go through it. And I just want people to know that after this, like there will be life after this. Um, and that no matter what you're been through, what you're going through, the other side is always going to look better when you look back. Um, and don't let anything you go through be in vain.
Mm-hmm.
It all has a purpose, and it's all going to do good if you work through your pain and you unsilence yourself. Tell your story.
Yes. So there was some. When was you like? When were you last released?
In 2000.
In 2000, and this is 2021.
Yes.
And
President.
you're still going through, okay? You're still going through therapy and treatment and getting support, correct? Okay.
What? Listen, I'm gonna die in therapy, and I say that, and I laugh about it, and I joke about it, but it's really not a joke. It's just not. Because I just don't believe um that we should ever be in a place where we're like, oh no, we're fine. Because guess what? The very thing today might trigger me tomorrow. And so I stay in therapy, like know your triggers. Um, and I've been able to space out. I've talked to my therapist every 2 weeks, but every 2 weeks there's a scheduled conversation. It has to happen. Um, and this is why I feel like my legislation is so important. Because I don't feel like anytime you snatch a human out of their habitat, whatever their habitat is, I don't care if you snatch them out of the dope house. That was the habitat they were used to. And when you take
Mhm.
a human and you take them out of whatever element they're used to, and you put them in a prison, that is a habitat that I don't care what conditioning you do to a human, nobody's ready for that. It is
Okay.
just you
Thank
can't.
you. So, oh, I'm sorry. Were you still talking? Okay. Thank you so very much, Shawanna. I know that we are at 9:53 p.m., so I want to be respectful of time. And sis, I know that there's three things that you want to leave with our audience. Shawanna, again, thank you so very much for your transparency, for your honesty. There was so much more that you shared with us that we didn't have an opportunity to touch on. And I just want to just mention you this one thing, and sis, I'm gonna hand it over to you so you can leave us with your three things, and then I'll take it back over. You mentioned you don't go to barbecues, you don't go to 4th of July celebrations or anything dealing with fireworks because as a
That's
result of your incarceration and the things that you went through in the child care system. Well, I don't know why I can't bring that up right, but there are certain things in your life that it brings shock to your system, it brings trauma to you on a regular basis, so you won't even allow yourself to be in those environments and those spaces. You can't enjoy your everyday life like we do, or anyone else does that have not been incarcerated, or maybe they have been incarcerated but they don't have these specific things that are going on, whereas everyone comes out with a different experience, a different set of traumas, a different set of brokenness, and we all need to seek for hope. So
absolutely.
I wanted to mention that. And sis, over to you so we can get ready to close this out. Thank you, Shawanna.
Well, bless the Lord. We made it through, ladies. Okay, we can.
Yeah.
It was a very emotional one, but we held it together as the strong pillar of the communities that we are. This is what
Yeah.
we do, right? So I know Shawana, I think you be laughing at me and not with me, sis. That's all right.
Awesome.
But I want to just kind of shout out to you real quick. One of the things I want to say is I'm so proud of you for being So strong and continually facing this every single day to share. And I'm not saying like, oh, woo, 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 you po thing. I'm not putting you down there like, you some kind of victim. I'm putting you up there like you are, truly victorious because you in the face of it every single day. And not many people are able to do that, right? People who get sexually assaulted, for instance, to turn their life over to be advocates for females like that, that is you facing it and refacing it every day. So that's what I mean when I say I'm so proud of you. I want to acknowledge you for being courageous and strong like that, and just burning the midnight oil. You go, girl. Um, but so what I do want to say is, guys, we really have to come to grips with the fact that there's some screwed up stuff happening in this world. And we know that, but so what? So we know it. And then what's next? Do you just watch it happening in front of you, or do you try to do your part to assist? Now you're hearing Shawanna, she's way in New York, but you can easily uh, plug into what she's doing and support her. You screw off $25 every, maybe, put it into her hands. Put it into what she's doing. This costs money. This takes things to happen. She is working on legislation. I guess my whole points is just like kind of advocating for you this night. And I gotta hurry up. Okay, let me stop. I'll say everything else I gotta say in the after the party show. So let me say that since I'm just gonna cut it off. You go, girl. It's all about you on tonight. Okay. And after this at 10:15, we're going to be having, as you know, a quick after the party show where we're going to live, laugh, love, and get grateful. And as always, offer up some prayer requests, or prayers for your requests. And we want you to join us. And that's at 10:15. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll just have to refresh your YouTube page. If you're watching on Facebook, you just have to do the same thing because the link is already up. Over to you.
Awesome, sis. So I just want to, let the people know my experience as an officer in the criminal justice system and as a parole officer, working for the Board of Pardons and Paroles as a hearing officer for the state of Texas. I was responsible for creating those revocation point reports and requesting warrants for people's arrest for failure to complete their supervision or comply with the rules and conditions or not use drugs or not commit another crime or failure to be at home for their home visit or whatever the situation may be. So I was a part of the solution the best way that I knew how, because I had the capacity to make a choice in my hand, right? And then you have as a corrections officer, I could have either mistreated the inmates or respected them and give them due justice as treating them as human beings, whether right or wrong. There are people that you would say were not deserving of respect. Okay, you can say that. That's fair. But at the end of the day, there's a small difference between you and them. They were caught and you were not. They made a choice and you did not. See, at the end of the day, we all have a decision to make. And your decision, from the moment that you're able to be responsible and held accountable for your own decisions, biblically and by society standards, you alter the course of your life. Now, because I have so much knowledge and I have well over 25, 30 years by now or so experience within the criminal justice program and system, starting from a junior police officer as a kid, I have created at the appointed time, and I've created social integration, which is to work with businesses. So individuals like Shawanna and other second chance community members will have an opportunity to get jobs and employment and be able to work with businesses, and businesses understand what it looks like and what it takes to work with someone who's been previously incarcerated, but is still dealing with trauma. They're systematically told what to do, when to eat, when to use the restroom, when to get up, when to go to sleep, when to blink their eyes, when they can wash their clothes, all of these things. They are controlled, they are programmed. And it's very important that we as human beings and we outside of the system, on the other side of the system, learn to engage and respectfully understand what they have gone through. Because everyone who's been a part of the system is not wrong. Everyone who has been a part of the system is not in the system because of their choosing. Shawanna was born into the system. She was given her birth name by a woman who was incarcerated with her mother. That was not her fault. She didn't choose that life. Unfortunately, that was the path that she had to take. But there are resources available to all kinds of people. There are resources available. There are programs available in the city that you stay in, a city near where you reside in. There is legislation. There are people that are fighting for a cause for your rights, your freedom, whether you have mental health concerns, conditions, or not. It is so critical. It is so important that we take a stand. It is so important that we begin to develop these relationships and we begin to provide support. And it's not always financial. Sometimes somebody just needs to smile. And other times it is financial because work has to be done. What part are you going to do? How are you going to step up? What difference can you make today, tomorrow, and for the future? Because if it's not you, it could be a family member. It could be your child, your grandchildren. Who would be next? And no, the criminal justice system is not all wrong, but there are some flaws. And there's some things that need to be worked on and need to be fixed. But we all have an opportunity to play a part in bringing people back into the communities to make a difference and create legacies for their families and do right for the wrongs they did do. And those who didn't do wrongs, help them recover and re-begin life. So thank you so very much for your time, Shawanna. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your transparency. We love our guests. We want to continue to support our guests. And I am Nakia Franklin.
And I'm Vaughn Greta. I was on mute. I was on mute.
We are your hosts of The Real
and the Raw Talk Show,
where there are no boundaries.
And there are no judgments. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Real and Raw Talk Show with Nakia Franklin and Vaughn Greta. Remember to like and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel today. A special thanks to our guests, sponsors, and audience members. We are grateful for your support of our programming. If you would like to be a guest or sponsor of one of our shows, please email us at info.realrawtalkshow@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. This has been a Wisdom Entertainment production in association with Social Integration. The views and opinions expressed on the show do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of The Real and Raw Talk Show with Nakia Franklin and Vaughn Greta. Any content provided are opinions and do not intend to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, or anyone or anything. Stay connected and join us for our next conversation where there are no boundaries and no judgments.